Before we begin tonight's terrifying true story, I want you to think about the last time you were alone in a familiar place at night. Maybe it was walking to your car after work, or being alone in your house when everyone else was asleep. That feeling of safety can change in an instant when something doesn't feel right. Tonight's story comes from someone who experienced exactly that, an ordinary situation that turned into a nightmare. As I tell you this story, remember that this really happened to a real person, and it could happen to anyone. The most frightening experiences often occur in the places we feel safest. I never thought a laundromat could be scary. It's just a public place where you wash clothes, right? Fluorescent lights, the sound of machines tumbling, the smell of detergent and fabric softener. Completely ordinary, completely safe. That's what I thought until last summer in Phoenix, when my weekly routine at a 24-hour laundromat turned into something I still can't fully explain. My name is Rachel and I'm 28 years old. I work as a night shift nurse at a hospital in central Phoenix, and my schedule means I get off work around midnight most nights. By the time I get home, shower and wind down, it's usually 1 or 1:30 in the morning. I'd been using the Suds & Spin laundromat on McDowell Road for about 6 months because it was open 24 hours and located right between the hospital and my apartment. I could throw in my scrubs and regular laundry around 2 in the morning, and the place was usually empty or nearly empty at that hour. The laundromat was typical for Phoenix, a standalone building with a parking lot, bright fluorescent lights visible through the big plate glass windows, rows of commercial washing machines and dryers lining both walls. The floor was that industrial speckled linoleum that probably hadn't been replaced since the 80s. There were plastic chairs along one wall, a few folding tables for sorting laundry, and a change machine that only worked about half the time. The air conditioning struggled to keep up with the Arizona heat even at night, so the place always felt slightly too warm and smelled like a combination of chemical detergent, fabric softener, and that particular scent of overworked machines. I developed a routine quickly. I'd arrive around 2 a.m. every Wednesday morning with my 2 weeks' worth of laundry. I'd use the same 4 washing machines in the middle of the left. They were the newer front loaders that actually got clothes clean on the first try. While everything washed, I'd sit in one of the plastic chairs and scroll through my phone or read a book. The whole process took about 90 minutes, and then I'd drive home with my clean laundry and finally get to sleep. For the first few weeks, I was usually completely alone in the place. Maybe once or twice I'd see another person, always someone who looked like they worked night shift somewhere, doing their laundry at odd hours out of necessity, just like me. We'd nod at each other, maybe exchange a tired "good morning," and go about our business. It felt safe because it was so mundane, so routine, so boringly normal. Then I started noticing him. The old man. It was my 4th or 5th week using that laundromat when I first saw him. I'd just started loading my clothes into the washers when I heard the door chime. I looked up and saw an elderly man walking in, carrying a black garbage bag that seemed to be full of laundry. He was probably in his 70s, maybe early 80s, thin and slightly stooped, with white hair and deeply tanned skin, the way people get when they've lived in Arizona for decades. He wore dark clothes, black pants, and a dark grey button-up shirt that looked too heavy for the Phoenix heat, even at 2 in the morning. What struck me immediately was how he didn't acknowledge me at all. Most people, when they walk into a nearly empty public place and see another person, they make some kind of acknowledgement, a nod, a smile, a hello, basic human interaction. But this man acted like I wasn't there. He walked directly to the row of washing machines on the right side, went to the machine directly across from where I was loading my laundry, and started pulling dark clothes out of his garbage bag. I watched him for a moment, then went back to my own laundry. I could hear him moving around, the sound of clothes being stuffed into the machine, the clank of quarters going into the slot, the rush of water starting. I glanced over once and saw him settling into one of the plastic chairs with a newspaper. He never looked at me once. It should have been completely normal. An old man doing his laundry late at night. Maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he worked odd hours too. Nothing strange about it, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly. Maybe it was the way he'd walked in with such purpose, heading straight for the machine across from mine when there were at least 20 other available machines in the place. Maybe it was how he hadn't acknowledged my presence at all, not even a glance. Maybe it was something about his stillness as he sat there, reading his newspaper without ever seeming to turn the pages. When my wash cycle finished, I moved my clothes to the dryers. He got up at almost the same time and moved his clothes, all black clothing I noticed, all dark heavy fabrics, to the dryer directly across from mine. We were the only two people in the laundromat, and somehow we'd ended up using machines directly across from each other twice. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe he liked those specific machines. Maybe they worked better than the others. I finished drying my clothes, folded them quickly and left. He was still there when I walked out, sitting in that same plastic chair, staring at his newspaper. I felt his eyes on me as I pushed through the door, but when I glanced back, he was still, looking down at the paper. I drove home feeling unsettled for reasons I couldn't explain. The next Wednesday, I almost didn't go to that laundromat. I'd spent the whole week telling myself I was being paranoid, that there was nothing weird about an old man doing his laundry, but something made me want to try a different laundromat, just to avoid that uncomfortable feeling. In the end, though, I talked myself out of it. It was convenient. It was on my way home, and I was being ridiculous. So at 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I pulled into the familiar parking lot with my laundry basket. The old man's car was already there. I recognized it now, an old tan sedan, maybe from the early 90s, parked in almost the same spot as the week before. My stomach tightened. I sat in my car for a minute, telling myself this was stupid. It was a 24-hour laundromat. Plenty of people probably came at the same time every week. It meant nothing. I grabbed my laundry and went inside. He was already there, standing at the same washing machine he'd used the week before, loading dark clothes from the same black garbage bag. He didn't look up when I came in, didn't acknowledge me at all. I walked to my usual machines on the opposite side and started loading my clothes, hyper-aware of his presence across the room. This time I paid closer attention. I tried to be subtle about it, glancing over while I sorted my laundry. He was loading what looked like black shirts, black pants, maybe some dark towels or sheets. Everything was black or very dark grey. He moved slowly, methodically, pulling each piece of clothing out and shaking it before putting it in the machine. When his bag was empty, he fed quarters into the slot, set the machine to start, and then walked to the same plastic chair as last week and sat down with the same newspaper. I started my machines and sat down a few chairs away from him, trying to focus on my phone, but I couldn't stop watching him from the corner of my eye. He sat completely still, that newspaper open in front of him, but I never saw him actually reading it, never saw his eyes move across the page, never saw him turn to a new page. He just sat there, holding the newspaper in position, staring at it with an expression I couldn't read from where I sat. When my washing cycle finished, I moved to the dryers quickly, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. Like the week before, he got up almost immediately when his machine stopped and transferred his dark clothes to the dryer directly across from mine, the same dryer as last week. For the second time, we were positioned directly across from each other, our clothes tumbling in machines that faced each other. I could feel him watching me now, even though when I looked directly at him, his eyes were on his newspaper. I left as soon as my clothes were dry, not even folding them properly, just shoving them into my basket and hurrying out to my car. As I drove away, I looked back at the laundromat through my rearview mirror. He was standing at the window watching me leave. I could see his silhouette against the bright fluorescent lights, completely still, tracking my car as I pulled out of the parking lot. That's when I knew something was wrong. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. Something about this old man and his laundry routine was off in a way that made my nurse instincts scream danger. The third week, I tried to change my pattern. I came at 1:30 instead of 2, hoping to get in and out before he arrived. The parking lot was empty when I pulled in, and I felt a surge of relief. I grabbed my laundry and hurried inside, loading my machines as quickly as possible. Maybe if I could just finish before he showed up, I could adjust my schedule permanently and avoid him altogether. I just started my washing machines when I heard his car pull into the parking lot. My heart sank. Through the window, I watched him park in his usual spot, saw him get out slowly with his black garbage bag, saw him walk toward the entrance with that same methodical pace. He came through the door, and this time, for the first time, he looked directly at me, made eye contact, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was knowing, like he was aware that I'd tried to come early to avoid him, and he found it amusing that it hadn't worked. He walked to his usual machine, the one directly across from mine, and started unloading his black clothes. I sat down in one of the plastic chairs, my hands shaking slightly, pretending to look at my phone while I tried to figure out what to do. That's when I decided to pay very close attention to what he was washing. I watched as he pulled out each piece of clothing. Black shirts, black pants, black sheets. Everything was black or very dark, and everything looked worn and heavy, like the kind of clothes someone would wear to do dirty work. As he shook out each piece before loading it, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Some of the items had dark stains on them, stains that stood out even against the black fabric because they were a different texture, slightly stiff and discolored. And the color, where I could see it in the bright fluorescent light, wasn't just black. It was a deep reddish brown, the color of dried blood. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. They were just dirt stains, grease stains, anything but what they looked like. But then he pulled out a black towel and, in the harsh light, I could clearly see dark splatters across it. Unmistakable patterns, the kind of patterns you see in the emergency room when someone's been bleeding heavily. He must have felt me watching because he paused, holding that stained towel in his hands, and turned to look directly at me again. We locked eyes for a long moment. His expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised or embarrassed or concerned that I'd seen the stains. He just looked at me with that same flat, knowing expression. Then he carefully put the towel in the washing machine and continued loading the rest of his clothes as if nothing had happened. I sat frozen in my chair, my mind racing. I should leave. I should grab my wet clothes and just go. But I couldn't make myself move. Part of me was telling myself I was being paranoid, that there were innocent explanations. He could be a butcher. He could work in a restaurant. He could have injured himself and bled on his clothes. There were lots of reasons someone might have blood-stained laundry, but my nurse instincts knew better. I'd seen enough blood in my career to know what old, heavy bloodstains looked like, and I'd seen enough of them to know that the amount of staining on his clothes suggested a lot of blood, more than you'd get from a kitchen accident or a cut hand. This was the kind of staining you got from serious trauma, from major bleeding, from the kind of injuries people didn't walk away from. The old man finished loading, his machine fed in his quarters, and started the cycle. Then he walked over to where I was sitting. My heart started pounding as he approached. He stopped right in front of me, looking down at me with that same slight smile. "You're here early tonight," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much, like he spent most of his time in silence. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice coming out higher than normal. "Wanted to get an early start." He nodded slowly. "I noticed we come here at the same time, every Wednesday, same machines even." He gestured toward our washing machines spinning across from each other. "Creatures of habit, aren't we?" "I guess so," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're a nurse," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd seen my scrubs in my laundry, I realized. He'd been paying attention. Night shift at County Hospital. I didn't confirm or deny it, but my silence was answer enough. He smiled wider. "Hard work nursing, dealing with blood and bodies all night. Most people couldn't handle it." He paused and his eyes swept over to his washing machine, where his blood-stained clothes were tumbling in soapy water. "But some of us, we don't mind blood. Some of us are used to it." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. He stood there for another moment just looking at me, and then he walked back to his plastic chair and sat down with his newspaper like we'd just had a normal conversation about the weather. I waited exactly 5 minutes, counting every second in my head, and then I stood up. I walked to my washing machines. My clothes were only about 15 minutes into the cycle, still soaking wet, and I opened each machine and started pulling out my dripping laundry. I didn't care. I just needed to get out of there. "Leaving so soon?" he called out. "Your clothes aren't finished." I didn't answer. I grabbed my laundry basket, now full of soaking wet clothes, dripping water all over the floor, and I headed for the door. As I pushed through it, I heard him speak again, his rough voice carrying clearly across the empty laundromat. "Tough stains come out better at dawn, you know. The blood's had all night to set in. Takes multiple washes to get it really clean. Patience and the right temperature, that's the secret." I ran to my car, threw my wet laundry in the back seat, and drove home, going 20 miles over the speed limit, checking my rearview mirror constantly to make sure his tan sedan wasn't following me. When I got to my apartment, I carried my wet clothes inside and threw them in my own washing machine, my hands shaking so badly I could barely load them. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what he'd said, about how he knew where I worked, about the bloodstains on his clothes, about his casual comment regarding tough stains and dawn and patience, about how he'd watched me, studied my routine, positioned himself across from me week after week. The next day, I called the non-emergency police line. I tried to explain the situation. An old man at a laundromat doing laundry with what looked like bloodstains. The dispatcher was patient, but I could hear the skepticism in her voice. Was I certain they were bloodstains? Had he threatened me? Had he done anything illegal that I'd witnessed? When I said no, that he'd just made creepy comments and seemed to be following my routine, she said they'd add it to their report, but without any specific crime or threat. There wasn't much they could do. She suggested I use a different laundromat if I felt uncomfortable, so that's what I decided to do. There were other 24-hour laundromats in Phoenix. I'd just changed locations. Problem solved. I'd never have to see the old man again. That Wednesday, I went to a different laundromat on the east side of Phoenix, about 4 miles from my apartment. It was newer, cleaner, with better machines and brighter lighting. I arrived at 2:15 a.m., feeling safe in this new location. The parking lot was empty except for my car. Perfect. I loaded my clothes into the machines and settled into a chair with my phone, finally starting to relax for the first time in a week. About 20 minutes later, I heard a car pull into the parking lot. I glanced up automatically and my stomach dropped. A tan sedan, his tan sedan, parking right next to my car. I watched in horror as the old man got out, carrying his black garbage bag of laundry. He walked to the entrance, pulled open the door, and came inside. When he saw me, he smiled like he'd run into an old friend. "Rachel," he said, and hearing him use my name, a name he must have learned from my work badge or overheard in the hospital, made my skin crawl. "Different laundromat tonight. I'm trying this one too. Heard the machines are better." He walked past me to the row of washers and started loading his clothes into the machine directly next to mine. Not across from me this time, right next to me, close enough that I could smell him. A scent of old fabric and something chemical, and underneath it something metallic that might have been blood. I grabbed my phone and stood up. I didn't care that my clothes were mid-cycle. I was leaving. I was going straight to the police station and filing a proper report because this wasn't coincidence anymore. This was stalking. "Don't go," he said, not turning around as he continued loading his dark clothes. "We're just getting to know each other. You and me, Rachel. We're the same. We both work with blood. We both work at night. We both know things other people don't know. Stay away from me," I said, backing toward the door. "I'm calling the police." He finally turned to face me, and his expression was calm, almost gentle. "The police because I do my laundry? Because I happen to use the same laundromats as you? I'm just an old man washing clothes, Rachel. There's no law against that." He was right, and we both knew it. He hadn't done anything technically illegal. He'd just appeared at the same places I did, washed his suspicious laundry, made unsettling comments. Nothing I could prove was a threat, nothing concrete enough to get him arrested. "I work in a meat processing plant," he said calmly, answering the question I hadn't asked. "Used to work there anyway, retired now, but I still help out sometimes. Butchering, cleaning. That's where the stains come from, if you were wondering. Pig blood, mostly. Beef blood. All looks the same once it dries." He smiled. "I noticed you looking at my laundry last week. Thought you might be concerned, but it's nothing illegal. Just blood from work. Perfectly innocent." The explanation was smooth, rehearsed, and maybe it was even true. But the way he said it, the way he was looking at me, told me he knew I didn't believe him, and he didn't care. I left without another word, got in my car, and drove directly to the police station. I filed a report, gave them his description, his car details, explained the whole situation. The officer taking my report was sympathetic, but ultimately said the same thing the dispatcher had. Without concrete evidence of a threat or a crime, there wasn't much they could do. The bloodstains could be from meat processing, like he said. Following me to a public laundromat wasn't technically illegal unless he was making specific threats. They'd add it to their report and patrol by the laundromats more frequently. But beyond that, their hands were tied. I went home feeling helpless and terrified. How had he known I'd be at that other laundromat? Had he followed me when I left work? Was he tracking me somehow? I checked my car for tracking devices and found nothing. I checked my purse, my phone, everything. Nothing. For the next 2 weeks, I washed my clothes at different laundromats every time, never going to the same place twice, varying my schedule. Tuesday at 3 a.m. at one location, Thursday at midnight at another, Saturday afternoon at a completely different part of town. I never saw him again, never saw his tan sedan in any parking lot. The police reported no sightings of him at the original laundromat either. I started to relax. Maybe he'd given up. Maybe my police report had scared him off. Maybe he'd found someone else to fixate on. I hated thinking that, the idea that he might be doing this to someone else, but I was relieved to be free of his attention. Then, 3 weeks after my last encounter with him, I was at work on a quiet Wednesday, night shift. Around 2 a.m., my old laundromat time, I got called to the emergency room to help with a trauma case coming in by ambulance, multiple stab wounds, victim found in an alley, massive blood loss. When the ambulance arrived and we got the patient into the trauma bay, I looked at the victim's belongings that had been bagged, clothes that were being cut off for treatment. Everything was black, black shirt, black pants, soaked through with blood. I felt a chill run down my spine even as I focused on helping save the patient's life. The victim survived barely. When he was stable enough to talk to police, I heard him describe his attacker from outside the room where I was charting. "Old guy," he said weakly. "White hair. Didn't say much. Just came at me with a knife in the alley behind the warehouse where I work. Tried to rob me, I think. Got my wallet." I should have said something to the police. Should have mentioned my experiences with the old man at the laundromat. But what would I say? That I'd seen an old man washing blood-stained clothes and he'd followed me to a different laundromat 3 weeks ago? It proved nothing, connected to nothing. And part of me was terrified that if I drew attention to myself again, if I tried to connect him to this attack, he'd know. He'd know I was talking about him, and he'd come back into my life. So I said nothing. I finished my shift, went home as the sun came up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. He'd moved on to someone else. I was safe. But then the postcards started. The first one arrived at my apartment 2 weeks after the stabbing victim came through my emergency room. No return address. A postcard with a picture of Phoenix at night, the city lights spread out under dark sky. On the back, in handwriting that looked shaky and old, it said, "I found a new place to do my laundry. The stains come out much better there. Hope your schedule is working out better now." I threw it away immediately, my hands shaking. A coincidence had to be a coincidence. The second postcard came a week later. Another Phoenix scene, this time the downtown area during the day. "Saw you at the hospital last Tuesday. You looked tired. Hope you're taking care of yourself. It's important to maintain a routine." He'd been at the hospital, he'd been watching me at work. I filed another police report, brought them the postcards. They said they'd investigate, but the postcards weren't threatening, just weird. Still not enough for a restraining order without knowing who was sending them or having proof of identity. The third postcard arrived at my parents' house in California. I hadn't lived there in 6 years. The message said, "Your mother's garden looks lovely this time of year, the roses especially." That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop. He'd found my parents' address. He'd been to their house. He was letting me know that no matter where I went, no matter how I changed my routine, he could find me. He could find the people I loved. And there was nothing I could do about it because he was always just one step within legal bounds, always just barely not doing anything prosecutable. I'm still in Phoenix. I still work at the same hospital. I've moved to a different apartment, one with better security, though I don't know if it matters. I do my laundry during the day now, at busy times when the laundromats are full of families and the safety of crowds. I vary which one I use. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I haven't seen him again, not in person, but the postcards keep coming. Once a month like clockwork. Different Phoenix landmarks, always the same shaky handwriting, always messages that are just unsettling enough to keep me afraid, but vague enough that the police can't act on them. I remember you said you liked that coffee shop on 7th Ave. The traffic on I-10 is terrible this time of year. Wednesday nights must be quieter at work now. The police still have my reports. They've connected the postcards to the description of the old man, but they've never been able to find him. No one matching his description has been arrested for the stabbing. His tan sedan has never been spotted by patrol officers. It's like he's a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, always watching, always one step ahead. What terrifies me most is that I don't know what he wants. He's never made an explicit threat, never said he wants to hurt me. But the blood-stained clothes, the stalking, the postcards, they all add up to something. Some intention that I can't see yet, but that's there, waiting, like laundry soaking overnight, waiting for dawn to be properly washed. I've thought about leaving Phoenix, starting over somewhere new, but those postcards tell me it wouldn't matter. He found my parents in California. He's showing me that geography doesn't matter, that he can reach me anywhere, that whatever connection he's decided exists between us, it's permanent. Sometimes late at night when I'm at work during a quiet moment, I think about those Wednesday mornings at the laundromat, how routine and boring and safe they seemed, how I'd load my clothes and scroll through my phone and think about nothing more serious than which detergent to use. I miss that innocence, that belief that a public place, a well-lit commercial building, a simple routine task like laundry could be completely safe. Now I know better. Now I know that predators don't just lurk in dark alleys or isolated areas. Sometimes they're right there in the fluorescent light, washing their blood-stained clothes in the machine next to yours, smiling like they're just another person doing a mundane chore. Sometimes they're patient. Sometimes they establish patterns. Sometimes they study you for weeks before they ever say a word. And sometimes, no matter how many precautions you take, or how many times you change your routine, or how far you run, they find a way to let you know they're still there, still watching, still waiting for whatever moment they've decided is right. I carry pepper spray now. I've taken self-defense classes. I've installed security cameras at my apartment. I've done everything the police suggested and more. But I still check the parking lot before I go into any building. I still look over my shoulder constantly. I still feel my heart race every time I see a tan sedan, even though there are thousands of them in Phoenix. Because I know he's out there somewhere. Maybe washing his clothes at dawn when the stains come out better. Maybe watching my apartment building from a distance. Maybe standing in the hospital lobby, just another elderly visitor waiting for a glimpse of me. Maybe planning his next postcard message, something to remind me that he hasn't forgotten, that our connection, this thing he's decided exists between us, is still alive in his mind. The worst part is the waiting, the not knowing when he'll escalate. The police keep telling me that most stalkers eventually either give up or make a mistake that lets them be caught. But some stalkers are patient. Some stalkers are methodical. Some stalkers wash their blood-stained clothes multiple times at dawn and smile when they talk about tough stains and the importance of routine. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. Because if something happens to me, if I become another trauma case coming through the emergency room doors, I need there to be a record. An old man, white hair, tan sedan, black clothes with bloodstains, patient enough to establish a routine, smart enough to stay just inside legal bounds, connected enough to me now that I feel his presence even when I can't see him. They say the most dangerous predators are the ones who don't look dangerous, the ones who could be anyone's grandfather, doing their laundry in the middle of the night, the ones who know how to smile and make small talk and stay just close enough to terrify, without giving you anything concrete to report. I think about that stabbing victim sometimes, the one with the black clothes soaked in blood. I think about how he said the attacker was an old man who didn't say much. I think about how that victim survived, barely, and I wonder if that was the point. If the old man wanted him to survive, if the attack was practice, if he's learning, improving, washing the evidence away at dawn, preparing for something bigger. And I think about how he knows where I work, knows my schedule, knows what I look like in my scrubs when I'm focused on saving lives, when I'm surrounded by blood and trauma and the kind of injuries people don't walk away from. The kind of injuries that leave the kind of stains that take multiple washes to get really clean. I don't know how this story ends. I'm living it right now in the middle of it, waiting to see what happens next. All I know is that I'm not safe, that a routine trip to wash clothes turned into something darker than I could have imagined, that somewhere in Phoenix an old man is probably loading his washing machine right now, feeding in quarters, setting the temperature just right, patient and methodical, knowing exactly how to get tough stains out, and knowing exactly where to find me when he's ready. What I learned from my experience is that we take safety for granted in the most ordinary places. A 24-hour laundromat seems like it should be safe. It's well lit, it's public, it's mundane. But predators know that too. They know we let our guard down in familiar places during routine tasks. They know that's exactly when we're most vulnerable. If you work odd hours and need to do errands late at night or early in the morning, trust your instincts when something feels wrong. If someone is consistently in the same place as you at the same time, if they seem to be watching you, if they position themselves near you repeatedly, those aren't coincidences. Pay attention to those warning signs. Don't dismiss your discomfort as paranoia. I wish I'd acted on my instincts earlier the first time I felt uncomfortable around the old man. I wish I'd left that laundromat and never gone back after the first week when something felt off about how he never acknowledged me. I wish I'd trusted that feeling in my gut that told me his presence wasn't random. By the time I saw the bloodstains and heard his comments, it was already too late. He'd already established a pattern, already connected himself to my routine, already learned enough about me to follow me wherever I went. The police told me that stalkers often fixate on people during routine activities. They study patterns, learn schedules, and insert themselves into their victims' lives gradually. By the time the victim realizes something is wrong, the stalker has already gathered information about their work, their home, their family. That's why it's so important to vary your routine if you work odd hours. Don't go to the same places at the same times every week. Don't make yourself predictable. And if someone seems to be following that pattern with you, report it immediately, even if you think you sound paranoid, even if they haven't done anything explicitly threatening. Create a paper trail with the police so that if things escalate, there's already documentation. Take pictures of vehicles that seem to appear wherever you go. Save any messages or mail they send. Don't engage with them directly. It only encourages the behavior. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you during a routine errand? Have you ever noticed the same person appearing at the same place as you multiple times? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes talking about these experiences helps us recognize the warning signs and trust our instincts before situations escalate. Stay safe out there, especially during late-night hours when you're alone in public places. Pay attention to your surroundings. Trust your gut when something feels wrong. And remember that the scariest people are often the ones who look completely ordinary, who could blend into any everyday situation, who are patient enough to watch and wait until they're ready to act. The truly terrifying thing about my story is that it's not over. I'm still living it, still waiting to see what happens next. The postcards still come. I still feel watched. And somewhere in Phoenix, that old man is still out there, still washing his blood-stained clothes at dawn, still patient, still methodical, still connected to me in his mind. And there's nothing I can do except wait and watch and hope that one day he'll make a mistake that finally gets him caught. If you found this story unsettling, share it with someone who works odd hours or does errands late at night alone. Remind them to trust their instincts and vary their routines. And if you've ever had an experience where someone seemed to be following your pattern or watching you during routine activities, know that you're not being paranoid. Your fear is valid. Your instincts are trying to protect you. Listen to them.